Hello, everyone. Good evening. We are live on YouTube. Miss Daristella Ledger, I did just want to let you know I am filling in for Christina. She is still on vacation, so I will be running the agenda and sharing my screen and advancing the slides for our presenters this evening.
Thank you so much. How are you doing today, Hannah?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Okay. I had a hard time accessing the agenda. Do you mind putting it up?
Of course, no problem. And you're able to see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll get started in a little bit. So we'll give board members, fellow board members, and everyone else, I would say like 5 minutes. We'll get started no later than 4:35.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Hannah, does my is the background, is the sun in my face, or should I just, if I blur, will it be better?
I think it's easy to see on my end. Do you want to try blurring? Yeah, it's it.
Better?
Paul said yes.
I sort of did a shrug. I feel like they're similar.
Maybe I can just lower my shade. Oh, we're live, right? We're live. Great. Hi, everybody.
We are live. We do have
Oh, Hannah, you're coming in delayed for me, actually.
Yeah, you're frozen. Uh-oh.
Oh, no, it's France, board member Daristella Ledger that's coming in delayed.
Oh,
Yes.
really? Well, looks Hannah, me screen frozen.
Can folks hear me? I see Paul. I can see Paul moving.
I can hear you. Yep. I mean, board member Daristella Ledger, you are breaking up for me too. Oh.
Hi, board member Daristella Ledger. Am I coming in better for you?
I think it was me because I just got kicked out and then came back in, I guess. So, or disconnected and I'm back. So you sound clear now. Trying to see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Uh-oh. Okay, good. It's breaking up a bit though. Hannah, do you know if any of the other board members said that they'd be attending?
I
Maybe
did
join.
an out of office from Miss Oliver.
Mm-hmm.
So I do not know if she'll be able to join us. I did not hear from any other members, but I will go ahead and I want to check the calendar invite.
Okay. And once again, we'll get started at 4:35 to be respectful of everyone's time.
I just sent a message to Miss Brody. So I'll let you know if I hear back, or we may see her join in the next couple of moments.
Okay. It looks like, well, I thought I saw board member, oh, there she is. Board member Oliver is there. Okay, so we can get started. It's 4:35. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Francoise Darastel Ledger, Chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee for the Hartford Board of Education. Today is September 27th, and this is our committee meeting. And I would like to, we're going to popcorn it so that everyone can introduce themselves and their roles, and then we'll get started. So I will popcorn it off to Iris Gomero, is it?
That's correct. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Iris Gomero, Assistant Superintendent of Human Capital and Talent Development for Manchester Public Schools. I am currently completing my O93 and I'm shadowing Dr. Leslie Torres as a superintendent. Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for that introduction. And who are you going to popcorn it to?
I'll popcorn it to Tori Niles.
Hello, everyone. Tori Niles Outler, Assistant Superintendent for School Leadership and Student Success. And unfortunately, I can't see anyone. So you'll have to tag someone for me.
How about Daisy Torres Hill?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Daisy Torres Hill, Acting Assistant Superintendent of Professional Learning and Multilingual Learners. I apologize, I'm a little bit stuck in traffic, but I do believe I saw Miss Katie Leonard on the call, so she would be the next person I will tag.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I am Katie Leonard, Acting Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, and I will tag Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Paul Foster, Deputy Superintendent, and I will tag in Board Board Member Oliver.
Good evening, everyone. Kim Oliver, board member. Happy to be here and see everyone this evening. And I'm going to tag in the superintendent.
Hi, everyone. Superintendent Leslie Torres Rodriguez. Nice to see you all. And I'm tagging in our Chief of Schools.
Hi, everybody. Corinne Barney. I am Chief of Schools and Innovation. Nice to see everybody. And I will tag in, I think the last person left is Hannah.
Hey everyone, good evening. I am Hannah Wheeler. I'm a special projects manager in the Deputy Superintendent's office, filling in for Christina Santiago tonight, and I will tag in Charisse.
Good afternoon, everyone. Charisse Eichel, Special Projects Manager, supporting the Office of the Superintendent. And I'm going to give it back to Board Member Ledger.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your introductions and your just brief description of your roles. So let's see. Hannah, can we please have the agenda up?
Yes, are you able to see it?
No, I see you. Up there. Okay. Thank you so much. And our first agenda item is plans for school excellence and accountability and school empowerment teams. And who will be presenting?
That would be me. If Hannah, if you can support with the presentation, thank you. And Deputy Foster will also join me midway through as he is going to present on our school empowerment team work. However, I'll just do a quick overview in our next slide. For tonight, first we'll have an update on some of the shifts that we have made in our process for school planning and also our process for providing district support to schools as they implement their school improvement plans. We have worked collaboratively across departments to narrow what we're asking our schools to focus on while providing greater flexibility for schools to tailor their plan to the needs of their respective school community and context. And also we'll give you an update on the Innovation Network, right, that we launched this year. As some of you might remember, we do have 5 schools that have started their innovation process this year, and we just kind of want to give everyone an update as to how that work is also moving along. So we can begin first with talking about the improvement of our processes for school plans and also for district support to schools. These improvements take the form of our plans for school excellence and accountability and our school empowerment teams. And before I go into the details here, I do want to just voice over that we have been informed by feedback from a variety of stakeholders, but the majority of the feedback that we have kind of taken a step back to process deeply has been the feedback from our school leaders, in which, you know, they've gave feedback around how the central office support processes, procedures could be enhanced to better support them. You've often heard us talk about, you know, central office exists to be in service of schools. And so we really wanted to pay close attention to the pain points that our school leaders were experiencing. And so a lot of this has been informed by the trends that not only I heard during my one-on-one meetings with school leaders, but also Deputy Foster had some individual meetings with school leaders. I've met with assistant principals, and then we also had small group sessions with our school leaders to continue to get their feedback and ideas and suggestions. And so it's been a work in progress. But again, it has informed not just the processes, but also the structures at central office as well. And so we're going to go into some of those. So everything starts with a strategic operating framework for the 23-24 school year. As you know, we start with our district model for excellence and those 4 strategic goals, right, that you see at the top of the chart, right? You make, when we report to you all, it's in alignment with those priorities. Some of the documents that you receive for example, the contracts, right? We want to make sure that there's intentionality and alignment and coherence to those 4 priorities. And again, based on the data and the feedback from stakeholders, we worked as a senior leadership team to identify what it was that we needed to shift in our school planning and management process to ultimately improve outcomes for students in this school year. So we identified the need to do several things. One was to narrow our focus to the areas most likely to impact student outcomes. Also, ensure school plans focus on no more than 3 to 5 objectives that are like new or improved work that they're going to focus on this year. Also, monitoring and revising school and the departmental plans through regular data review and discussion between the school and also the district stakeholders, right? Our teams at central office. And lastly, we want to ensure that schools have one comprehensive action plan and not several plans emerging from several, in separate conversations with separate departments. Again, we're trying to narrow the focus and align everything that we do, and most importantly, the support that we provide. So based on these needs and our data, we identified a need to focus on strengthening rigorous Tier 1 core instruction, to deepen student connection to school, and to build a healthier staff climate and culture. So I'll talk more about each of these in detail, but I wanted to highlight the last 2 rows of this visual. So this is what the planning process, we ask schools to answer these 2 questions in each of the 3 areas that I just identified. Well, like we're asking, what is the one thing that will be significantly different by the end of the year? And we also ask, what is that one action your school will take to achieve that important improvement or change effort? So between those 2 questions, schools then are creating their plan for school excellence and accountability, PSEA. So in each area, right, you see it across there, instruction, engagement, and talent. We asked our schools to define where they want to be at the end of the school year and how it is that they're going to get there. So you're probably thinking or asking yourself alone, why is it that there's a focus on one action? We know that there are just multiple ways to deepen school connections to school, but we want each school to focus their work by choosing one way, right, that they're going to achieve their desired improvement. Because if you try to do too many things, right, none of those things are going to be done extremely well, right? Because you're managing and grappling with so many things at the same time. So I'll talk about each of the 3 focus areas for this year. So I know there's a lot here. I don't expect you to read all the text at this moment. What I do want to highlight is why a focus on that rigorous Tier 1 core instruction, right? And when we talk about Tier 1 core instruction, that's foundational, right? It's making sure that we're talking about grade level instruction happening regularly in every class and in every day, right? For all of our students. It's what we think of as traditional schooling, right? A teacher working with students on a particular unit or a lesson. Typically, right, and not in the wake of the pandemic, we would expect that Tier 1 core instruction is going to meet the needs of the majority of the students, with a subset of students needing a little more support, right? That's where the next tier comes in, Tier 2, or the next tier after that, Tier 3, right, in terms of interventions, right, to achieve, for example, proficiency. The rigorous piece of this, rigorous means that instruction and the learning experience are on grade level and challenging for our students. And then this is grounded in some deep work that we had done with, we leveraged the New Teacher Project and the Opportunity Myth, which was some of us on the call did a close read of this report, where essentially it's the report found that students with greater access, greater consistent access to grade appropriate assignments close the gaps with their peers by more than 7 months. And so making sure that students have that access across all schools is something that we're after as well. And also that students are more engaged if they're in classes where they get to do that deep thinking, where the student is doing that thinking, and it's not the adult in the front of this, in the front of the class, right? Doing the thinking for the students. And when we talk about each school planning for how they will improve Tier 1 core instruction, right? Those are all the pieces that are involved in the rigorous Tier 1 instruction, right? So that's one aspect of it. Second, we're focusing on deepening the connections that students have and feel that they have to the school. We know that student learning cannot happen if a school is not a place in which each and every one of our students feel like they want to be there regularly, every single day. You know, tying this to our second topic for tonight, right? The desire to make a school a place where students want to be and where they are excited to learn. And like, that's also a central focus, as you know, of our innovation work, right? The work that we're trying to improve. And we know that we've heard it from our students telling us, I don't always feel engaged. I don't always feel connected. And I don't always understand the relevance of what it is that I'm learning. So student connection to school is about the relationships with adults and with their peers, as well as students connecting with one or more of the experiences at school that build connectedness, which, right, it can be in a math class, it can be, you know, feeling connected to the pathway, it can be a sport or an extracurricular activity. And as you can see in the information from the Institute for Education Services and Harvard, we know from the research that student connection matters significantly for not just academic, but also the social, emotional success and well-being of our young people. So as with rigorous Tier 1 core instruction, each school has also identified one thing that they will focus on this year to deepen that student connection. And lastly, the third focus here is each school is identifying one thing that they're going to focus on in order to build a healthier staff climate and culture, right? Climate, for the board members that remember from the retreat, climate speaks to how staff feel about their work environment, and culture speaks to those shared expectations for how the work gets done together. So norms, values, attitudes, as well as like the leadership impact, right? Leadership, all of those things impact how work feels and our ways of working together. And when we think about our vacancy rates and some turnover, it seemed obvious that this had to be one of the priorities. And also we know that the research agrees as well. There's evidence that high rates of teacher turnover is harmful for students, right? Impacting things like test scores for middle schoolers, for example. We also know that people are less likely to leave an employer if they feel that they are cared about in terms of their well-being. So we know the critical importance of our staff to the success of students, and we need to redouble our efforts to ensure that our staff are feeling good about where they're working and that they're supported by the way in which the work is happening. So with that in mind, each school developed an objective around the school culture and climate. And I have a few more slides, board member Darius Ledger. So is it okay that I keep going and then do questions?
That's fine.
Okay. So ultimately I talked about processes and structures. So ultimately there are 3 structures through which we will support schools in executing or carrying out their plans and monitoring of progress on the strategic operating framework that I just reviewed. So in the center, you're going to see the PSEA, right? The Plan for School Excellence and Accountability. Based on the strategic operating framework that I just reviewed, each school has developed a PSEA that identifies their key objectives in instruction, right? Those 3 areas: instruction, engagement, and talent. And the PSEA is our new format and process for what has been, you probably remember, the school improvement plan. So on the left is the plan for departmental excellence and accountability. Now stay with me, because every central office department is also developing a plan aligned to the strategic operating framework. These plans will guide the critical improvement work that needs to happen in each central office department, right? So I was talking about schools. Central office department also will have a plan for excellence and accountability. And we also created our school improvement teams. That's to the right-hand side, the darker green. So in short, school improvement and school empowerment team, the SET, is a structure that is going to allow regular data review and dialogue between central office and schools to ensure that schools are implementing the plans for excellence and accountability, and that they also have the necessary support from us at central office to be successful. So I'll share briefly how the PSEAs were developed. The process for the department plans mirrored this as well. So the plans for at the school level started back in June, and over the summer, the schools worked with their teams and stakeholders to identify their objectives and those key actions in alignment with the 3 areas, right? Instruction, engagement, and talent. We provided additional funding to each school to allow them to pay staff to participate in planning activities over the summer. In addition to the objectives and the key actions, schools developed process measures and outcome measures for each objective. So the process measures are how is it that, right? Like, how are we going to know if those key actions are being implemented? And then the outcome measures is, how do we know if the objectives are being achieved? We then had a multi-layered feedback process, right? We wanted to continue to engage those that are going to be impacted by this work throughout the process. And so our executive directors of school leadership provided that first round of feedback to our school leaders, and school teams revised if they needed to. Then central office departments also provided feedback through the executive directors so that there could be further evolution and improvement of those draft plans. The executive directors and the principals also worked with central office to identify who would serve as members of those school empowerment teams. And then the plans were completed actually this week, which is a little earlier than we had. Is that the case, Deputy Foster, than we previously thought would be the case with the school improvement plans? Because normally we're much later into the year with the school improvement plans.
Yeah.
So we're a little ahead of the game there. So I know that was a lot of information. And I think I'm going to pause here before I turn it over to Deputy Foster. Esther, for you to do this, the empowerment, the school empowerment teams? Let me just check in with Board Member Ledger. There's 3 slides left, but I just wanted to pause here for now and see.
Okay, well, I do have a question, with regards to the, that one thing each school will select, will focus on. What if there's a situation or something comes up where they may feel like, you know what, we may need to pivot? Is there flexibility for that, or must they continue?
So there's, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
And I said, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
If
What
there's
we're-
a situation.
What we're saying is that the focus on instruction, engagement, and talent is not going to change. There is opportunity to think about how that's going to be carried out. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Right, because we want to make
let
sure that
me
we're
see.
focused on that instructional piece, the engagement piece, and the talent. That is what our data, right, were saying to us we needed to prioritize. That might look different in a school that has,
Right.
for example, a Montessori curriculum, right? The instructions, we're still talking about rigorous instruction, but that might look different in that context.
Yes, especially with the design of the Montessori, the classroom, the instruction, and how students are able to move freely, and there's a lot of critical thinking that takes place. But there's definitely a great deal of academic rigor in Montessori. So I'm always going to talk about Montessori. But I also wanted to know if notice that some of the schools had similar goals, if you will, similar focus areas.
Yes. So for example, and Chief Barney can give an example. We have schools that need to have a focus on re-engaging at the students at the high school level, right? So their engagement area might look a little different than a school that's a pre-K 5 school, right? When we think about students in the path of the comprehensive high schools, right? Their work around engagement might look a little different than the work in Renzulli, for example. But the focus, right, that overall focus area is still remains. And what we want to leverage, Board Member Deristo Ledger, is when there are schools that have specific focus, that is where our executive directors of school leadership get creative with their time during our monthly time with the school leaders, right? They have what we call their network time. And that's an opportunity where our school leaders can learn from and one another. Because they share, right? They would be sharing those problems of practice.
That's good to know, because if there are, if there's one school that's, experiencing success in an area, they can share that with another one and say, you know what, maybe why don't you try this? Try this approach. This is working for us, and vice versa. If something's not working, they're not, continuing to hit that brick wall.
And there are some things that are not here for tonight. There are other structures that we are working on to get at exactly what you're saying. So Chief Barney, for example, right, is working with the executive directors to do exactly what you're describing, right? They get together regularly and they talk about what are those trends that they're seeing in terms of need or best practice across schools.
And now, are they also getting feedback from the teachers And also, are they looking to get feedback from the students as well and how they're feeling? Are they like doing, you know, like almost like a temperature check?
Yes, well, so in several ways, and I see you, Deputy Foster, I see you say yes. So I won't talk about the summits, so you can speak about that, but yes, Board Member Darcel Ledger, in addition to our the routine culture and climate surveys, our schools have different ways. So for example, there are the student councils, and they have, we want our schools to leverage student voice as much as possible, even in the lower grades. And so that is something that we're expecting our schools to make sure that they engage in. And then for us, and this is at the high school level, and Deputy Foster can speak more about this, is we are building off from the summit that we had with students in the spring. And so the goal this year is to be able to connect with all of our high schoolers throughout the year. Deputy Foster, anything else you want to say about that? Or I don't want to give out too much.
No, I mean, I think that's what you said is good. I mean, we're going to build additional opportunities to hear from all our high school kids, but I also agree with your point about informing the school-based plans, right? All of our schools were encouraged to be engaging with students, and even as the plan is implemented, engaging with students, what's landing, what's not landing.
It would be nice to hear from, you know, students, you know, at a board meeting, to get, you know, a presentation, if you will, and to hear their voices. You know, that would really be a nice thing to see. So I'm not going to, I know that Board Member Oliver had her hand up, and I apologize for kind of hijacking and like asking so many questions, but I was just, you know, very curious. So Board Member Oliver, you have the floor.
Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent, for the presentation. I apologize if I missed this, but I want to just go back to the timing piece here. I think you talked about that the schools have already created the new, I want to say the PSEAs. Are those, and you also talked about it's ahead of schedule, right? So one of my questions is, I'm aware of in the past when it was the school improvement plans, that those were plans that were shared with partners to align efforts, really to lift up what were key priorities for the school, so that if partnerships were also dealing with things like resources, even like our community schools, et cetera. So I just wanted to better understand, or just have you share your thinking in terms of like the timing of it now. So once they're in, is there then going to be an effort to educate others in the school communities?
So two things. One is throughout the summer process, Board Member Oliver, the expectation it was and still is for school leaders to engage their partners in this process, as it was with this SIPS, the school improvement process, specifically for those schools that are community schools, because as you know, right, it is a more extensive, even more coherent process for our community schools. So absolutely. And, I even imagine, and Deputy Foster, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we're thinking about, well, you're going to talk about the set, but the set and the opportunity for partners, right, to also somehow be part of that process.
Thank you.
And just want to just also, I was going to put it in the chat, but Board Member Darcel Ledger, you asked about students coming to the board, and I might as well just take this opportunity for the update. We are in the process of working with CABE to train the student representatives that will be at part of the board, like the extension of the board. So I just wanted to give that update as well.
Thank you so much. And let's see, Board Member Oliver, do you have any more questions?
No, I'm all set. I will acknowledge the audio for me is breaking up a little bit, Chair Daristella Ledger. Just want to give you a heads up, but I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And going move on to the next agenda item, unless there is more. I believe there's more.
There are a few more slides in this presentation, and then the slides for the next presentation are also in here, so I can just take it down if there's any remaining questions and then bring it back up.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, continue.
Continue. I think our chair said continue. So I'm going to tag you in, Deputy Foster, so that you can give a little more detail on the school empowerment teams, like who exactly participates in that, what is the content to be covered at those meetings?
Yes, thank you, Superintendent. So and I'm gonna start by just building off of a question, Board Member Daristella Ledger, you asked around the ability to pivot. And right, so what we have, the structure we're trying this year that we're calling a school empowerment team is an opportunity for stakeholders, both school and central office, to be part of a team that meets multiple times in the year with this express purpose of having those conversations about, let's look at the data, let's look at what we're hearing from students, let's look at what we're hearing from partners, and let's talk about what is working and what are opportunities for improvement in the execution of the PSEA. So actually, I think in some ways, this structure of the school empowerment team is one of the ways we're thinking about how to be set up well to pivot. Going back to your question, right? So if a school identifies their key objective and their key action to move rigorous tier 1 core instruction, and then we get to November, and there's some data that says this isn't working in exactly the way that we thought it would, that this school empowerment team is a context in which that conversation can happen about, well, are there changes that need to happen at the school level? Or are there changes that might need to happen at the central office level in order to support the school to continue to move that rigorous tier 1 core instruction forward? And so the set is this regular meeting. And if we go to the next slide, the set is the purpose, as I just talked about, is really to review progress on the PSEA, examine data, identify opportunities and challenges, and develop, again, school and central office actions. So one of the things we wanted to be clear about with this process is this is not central office people showing up at a school and asking a bunch of questions and giving a bunch of mandates. This is a collaborative conversation where we're identifying what are different supports the school might need from the central office, as well as what are pivots or shifts that might need to take place in the school's execution of their plan in order to achieve the objectives that we've set out in these plans. We're deliberately holding these meetings in schools. So central office members of the teams will travel to the schools for these set meetings, and that's very deliberate to visibly signal that this is about central office support for schools. And so again, process is designed to be about collaboration, partnership between each school and a team from central office. So just, real high level logistics, we're planning for each school empowerment team to meet 3 times a year. And those meetings will be about 90 minutes each, held at the school. And if we go to the next slide, you can see this is a sort of a sampling of like what's the membership of a school empowerment team. Now, not every central office department will sit on every school's empowerment team, right? Those decisions about who is supporting a particular school is really a function of data. It's a function of a conversation with the EDSL and the principal about what are the particular needs from the school. That those needs could be emerging from the data. Those needs could be emerging from the objectives that the schools identified in their PSEA. So I'll give one example. A school with significant facility challenges might be a school where a member of our buildings and grounds team would serve on the school empowerment team, but there's not going to be a member of our building and grounds team on every school empowerment team, right? So we're trying to tailor the central office support to the particular felt needs of each individual school. And again, that membership decision-making was a collaborative process between central office departments, school leaders, and EDSLs. One thing I don't think I said yet is that the set team membership will be consistent for the whole year. So this is not like schools aren't going to have somebody different showing up at the second set meeting than the first set meeting. It's going to be the same membership throughout the year. So there's building connection, building continuity. One thing I will say, two departments that will be represented on every school empowerment team meeting are finance and the Office of Talent Management. Because we want, right, those are supporting departments, right? But if a school, is looking at their data and identifying a challenge that they're facing relative to executing on their PSEA, and maybe it's a challenge relative to staffing, or maybe it's, they have an open position of one type and they need to change that and make it and move it to another type of position that will better meet the needs of what they're trying to do in their school. Having OTM and finance right in the set meeting with them, we can move those pivots more quickly. So that's really the membership of the team. And if we go to this final slide on the set process, this just gives you a quick sort of high-level overview of the set meeting process, like the inputs, the outputs, and the outcomes. So certainly we want this process driven by data, but we mean that data in lots of ways. It's quantitative, right? Formative assessment scores, attendance, discipline data. It's also qualitative data coming from set team members, right? What are school-based members of the team seeing? What are they hearing from students? What are they hearing from families or partners? It's also data from walkthroughs that take place, right? Classroom observations. And so the process we're envisioning is that each member of a set team will do some pre-work ahead of the meeting. They're going to look at data so that everybody, both central office and school members of the team, are coming into that meeting with some ideas already of what are we seeing as successes, right? Where are we seeing positive movement? Where are we seeing barriers? So that we can get into the meeting, we're focused on collaboratively talking about both root causes and both school and central office actions to support the execution of the PSEA. And that conversation about school and central office actions is where that pivot can happen, right? You see number 3 in outputs, adjustments to PSEA and central office supports, right? That'll be driven by data. And in the set meeting, we can talk about, well, maybe we need to tweak something in the school plan because of what we're seeing in the data. And then ultimately, of course, the outcomes of our set process is to achieve our district goals, or rather it'd be around student achievement, engagement, climate, and culture. And so that's a high level just overview of our school empowerment team process, but it works hand in hand with the PSEA that the superintendent talked about, right? Each school defining a plan for how they're going to move the needle on instruction, engagement, and talent. And the set is our opportunity throughout the year to say, just real time, what is working, what could work better, and what tweaks do we need to make at both the school and central office to achieve to achieve the objective by the end of the year. And so that's the end of sort of our set overview and our PSEA overview, and superintendent and board member Darius Ledger. We certainly could, I think we can take more questions on the set process.
Okay, thank you so much for the rest of the presentation, and I'm going to see if there are any questions. Wait, I want to mute. I apologize. I'm curious to know how I understand that you have school leaders, but how do they go about picking the teachers, or and I understand that each school it depends on what the focus is, but how do they go about selecting the teachers for that teacher input and the student input as well? Because I'm hoping that it's an equitable process so that you have a diverse, you have a diversity, there's diversity with regards to the voices and to the, to the needs that will speak to the needs of the students.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. And yes, I mean, I think that's part of the conversation that goes on between a principal and their EDSL as they think about the implementation of their school empowerment team. And I think there's various, right? So some of our schools may well be saying that for the purpose of the actual set team meeting, that it'll be the school-based instructional leadership team that is the members of the school team that actually sit on the set team. But certainly we want to have processes over the course of the year where teachers who don't necessarily sit on the set team meeting have opportunities to give voice into those conversations, along with students, along with families, along with partners.
Thank you so much. And I don't see any more questions, so thank you.
We can, Chair yeah, I was gonna say we can pause before we continue to the next portion. Are we good to continue, or do we have to? I can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, great. Yes, no, I'm ready to, if, we can, if we have the agenda up, if we're ready to move forward to the next agenda item, which is INET. We can do that.
Great. Okay, Deputy Foster, you're it.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, Chair Darissa Ledger. So it's early in the year, but we just want to give you, we said we would keep you current on what's happening with the Innovation Network. And so we're going to give you a quick update on the progress thus far. And so as you can see on the slide, we have 5 schools that are participating in the INET cohort, or I should say the inaugural INET cohort. And just as a reminder, this is something that is happening through funding from the Barr Foundation. And these 5 schools, as you'll recall, I believe we talked about this in the spring, we had a selection process where schools raised their hands. So schools self-identified, and we had initially 10 schools that expressed some interest. And we went through a multi-step process of talking with the schools about what they were thinking about in terms of innovation. And ultimately, these are the 5 schools who became part of the inaugural cohort for INET. And so if we go to the next slide, this just gives you a high-level overview of the work that's going to take place across the Innovation Network over the course of this school year. And so you can see in that top bar, right, there are going to be 5 professional learning sessions for the teams from these 5 schools. There will be every other week coaching, or twice a month, but essentially every other week coaching. We already had a virtual kickoff. So we had a kickoff with our INET cohort in August, which was exciting. And I think there was really good energy in the room with schools thinking about how do we do school differently. We heard the superintendent talk about in the PSEA presentation that we've gotten feedback from students about their experience of school. And we have these 5 schools who there was a lot of energy in our August meeting about what does innovation mean and how are we going to, both listen to our students, but also think with our students, our families, our community about how we can envision and deliver school differently. So that we had that kickoff. You see an excellent school visit. So we're going to give our 5 INET schools an opportunity to visit a school outside of Hartford, but in a like community where they're trying some different things, right? I don't know that anybody has it all figured out, but we want to go and see some other schools and think about what are ideas that we might be able to learn from, what are ideas we might be able to borrow from another school or district that's having some success trying something new. And then, you also see some of the deliverables that are going to come out of this work, right? Each school will get a discovery report, which is really what are the strengths and what are the opportunities for each of our INET schools as they dive into their innovation work. Each school will create over the course of this year their innovative design plan. And certainly there will be supporting systems and tools to support the innovation work. And some of that will be what's the innovation we need to do in central office so that central office, where we're not creating barriers to the innovation happening at the school level. And ultimately, the goal of this work, as with all our work, is improving our equitable outcomes for all students. So if we go to the next slide, you can see here, just going a layer deeper into those 5 in-person sessions. You can see on the left side here, just some examples of some of the session topics that folks are going to experience in their professional learning. And on the right, some of the community engagement that's going to happen. I'll highlight a couple things on this. On the accession topics, right? One of the topics that our INET schools will go through, that 3rd bullet, is they're going to go through a session on reimagining the student experience, right? What does that mean? What does that look like? How do you engage students in that process? And on the community engagement side, I'll highlight the empathy research, right? So how are we engaging in empathy research to understand what the experience of our schools is for our students and for our families? And then building that into the design work, right? That empathy research. And so those are just some examples of the work that our INET schools are going to undertake. And in every session, there will be sort of an ongoing theme that you see across the bottom there of planning the community engagement activities. So how are each of our 5, and it'll look different in each of our 5 schools, but how are each of our 5 INET schools engaging their entire school community? So that's staff, but it's also students, but it's also family, community partners, community stakeholders in the conversation about what they want their school to be going forward. And this is just a little bit of progress so far. And like I said, it's early, right? So we had our kickoff in August. This week, actually, our partners are on site and are spending time in each of our INET schools. But you can see the quotes at the bottom. Those are quotes from some of the folks who participated in our August kickoff, just, sharing some of their excitement about the work going forward. And actually our first on-site professional learning will happen shortly in the first couple of weeks of October. So one of the pieces of engagement we've already done is we engage with multiple stakeholders to talk about what innovation is to them and what does innovation mean. And, we're sharing on this, I think, this slide here. Yep. We're sharing, we got feedback from lots of stakeholders about what innovation means. So all we're sharing with you on this slide is a few of those quotes, but I'll just highlight a couple, right? I love the fact that we have a student saying we need to think outside the box, right? And then, 3 bullets down, we have a family member saying, and by the way, these are 2 separate conversations, but a family member saying we need to think outside the box. And just because nobody's done it doesn't mean it doesn't work, right? That's a voice from a family member of one of our students talking about what innovation means to them. And so what came out of that engagement, if we go to our next slide, is a draft definition of innovation. So this came from our engagement with stakeholders. I'm just going to be quiet for a moment and just give you an opportunity to read the draft definition. So I think for us and for me, things that jump out at me, that the emphasis on student voice and community as central to innovation, the emphasis on elevating the student experience, right? I like that word elevating, right? So where we have students who've given feedback and said, I don't know about this, right? Like this doesn't necessarily always land for me, or this doesn't always work for me. How are we elevating the student experience? And then of course, right, as I had said on an earlier slide, all of this in service of improving equitable outcomes for students. And so just, I think our last slide on our INET update is just a preview of what our INET schools are going to get in their first in-person session in October. They're going to be thinking about implications of liberatory design mindsets for their innovation work. And just let me pause there for a second, right? Because that's very lingo-y. So I will say, so liberatory design, it's an approach to design that is focused on addressing equity challenges in complex systems. And there's lots of components to this framework, right? So I'm not going to go deep in this framework at this moment, but I want to highlight one. So part of liberatory design is changing power dynamics by changing the relationship between those who hold the power to design and those who are impacted by what is designed. And so when we talk about student voice and student engagement in our INET process, that's what we're talking about, is changing the relationship, right? Historically, right, across all school systems, I believe, right? People who are designing what school looks like is not the students, right? It's not the people impacted by the design. And a very conscious and deliberate part of our design strategy for INET is that changing that dynamic of designer versus person impacted by design. And so, in our context, right, what that means is how do we in our innovation work ensure that our innovation is designed with and by students and with and by families who are impacted by the design. And also, right, the other things you see here in the first PL session for our INET schools, they're going to be exploring research about reimagining the student experience. And they're going to start, right, even in this first session, they're going to start to think about what does a multi-year innovation plan look like for our school. So I will pause there. And Superintendent, I don't know if there's anything you would want to add before we open it for questions.
Yeah, the one thing that I want to add is that, right, our approach to making sure that those that are impacted by the work are informing the work is not just limited to the INET schools, right? I mean, this Deputy Foster was explaining this as it relates to the update of the INET schools, but hence our work with expanding, for example, the Youth Summit to really get at as many, if not all, the voices across our high schools, making sure that schools, even elementary schools, have student councils and focus groups. So we really are trying to expand the opportunity for young people and our educators and our families right, to co-create the work with us.
So that's the overview, but we're certainly happy to take any questions about the INET process so far.
So thank you so much for that presentation. It was very informative, very innovative, if you will. No pun intended. I have a question with regards to something you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. If I heard you correctly, you mentioned that there were 10 schools that expressed interest, but you have 5 who are actually participating. So what about the other 5 schools? And are you looking to bring them in later on, or like what's going on with that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So it was a multi-step selection process, and we actually had several schools some schools just elected, said this isn't for me right now, right, as they went through that process. And others, we had conversations with them. So it was not what I mean to say, it wasn't like a paper pencil application kind of thing. This was a dialogue throughout the process. And so I think what we said to the schools we didn't end up kind of starting with this cohort was that it's not no, it's not yet. And so to your point, kind of we're thinking exactly what you just said, is that we needed to start with a small cohort because we didn't feel like we could support more than about 5 schools in taking this work on this year. And so we went through the process, but for the schools who were interested, but who aren't part of this first cohort, what we said to them is we very much want to extend this and expand this to another cohort next year. And so, that was really our response to folks. It's not no, it's not yet. And I think that was well received by all of those schools, by the way.
And are you able to share with us what schools those were? The schools that were not selected?
I certainly can. Yeah, I don't know that I could do it off the top of my head, but we can certainly share that with you.
Okay, thank you. And another question, I'm sorry. So the schools that weren't selected, the not yet schools, if you will, what supports are they being offered, or are they kind of, staying on the radar because they did express interest, because they felt that there was a need?
Yes, certainly. So they're certainly on the radar, as you said, and certainly, like, if we're able, right, we want to see how this goes in year 1, right? But assuming this goes the way we think it will and hope it will, we would like to launch a second cohort next year. And that second cohort, clearly those schools who were part of the first round process, I think would have a leg up in a process for the second cohort. But also to your point about what are the supports, this is our INET work specifically, but we are talking about and thinking about innovation across the board. And so even in the PSEA conversations, and as schools were designing their plans, we're talking about where are the places where we need to rethink, reinvent, and reimagine the ways we do school. And so we're supporting that work across all schools, right? So these schools are getting are moving through a specific process. But I would say across our professional learning and across some of the other work we're doing with all our schools, we are centering innovation and just not assuming that we're going to just keep doing things the way we've done them.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking to see if we have any questions. I don't see any hands raised.
No questions.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think we are good. So,
Thank you.
I believe that, and thank you so much for the presentation, for the presentations. And I believe that is the end of our meeting. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening for our Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. And this meeting is officially adjourned. Everyone have